I'm working on the last pair of chairs for our dining room set. So these are numbers 5 and 6. The first two, you may remember, were upholstered. The second two had Danish cord seats, which I had a fairly extensive set of videos for. And now the last two are going to have upholstered seats again. The basic geometry is similar to the Danish cord chairs. I've kept the lighter structure, so I'm hoping these are about the same weight as the Danish cord chairs. They'll be a little heavier just because the upholstered seat is going to be heavier than the Danish cord. So the main differences are the stretcher system, or the aprons, are just all single, right? Most of the stretchers on the other one were two pieces. I've got supports in here, or gussets, whatever you want to call them, that will help stiffen up the chair and give me a way to attach the seat. Once these were all in place, I already had these rabbets in here. I did have to route out these corners, and I used this jig to do that. I just clamped that in place and used a pattern bit and a router to route those out. So other than that, they're pretty much the same as the Danish cord seats. So I wanted to go into a little more detail on how I'm doing some of this stuff. I have a plywood piece that I've cut to fit inside here. The gap between the outside of this and these rabbets is 3/32 to 1/8. That should give enough room for a little bit of batting and the upholstery to wrap around. I will use bolts, some 1032 or 1024 bolts, whatever, to come up through these and into, there'll be T-nuts on here. Anyway, I'm going to walk through attaching these. These were all cut on my chop saw, and then I tweaked them on my disc sander because one of these joints is relatively square, but the other one is at an angle because these side stretchers angle down a little bit. And so anyway, so I had to kind of tweak these a little bit on my disc sander to get everything to align correctly. I've got them so that when they're sitting in here, this distance, the gap down from here is similar to the gap here, right? If these were square, they'd be sitting more like that. So I'll go through the process of how I attach those. I put a little glue on here just to kind of make things as rigid as I can. And note that the bottom part of these are sanded and that edge is rounded. So I'll put that in place. And I've got, 30-second gap right there. So I've got a little right angle jig here. And I'll clamp this. And I've already done the other ones. I found that if I clamp it off to one side, I've got easy access to this screw. So that feels pretty good. So when I'm putting in screws, I've already got, of course, a clearance hole in there. I use a bit with the same size as my clearance hole, and I just dimple where I want to go to make sure that my pilot hole is centered, and then I can eyeball center there. And then Okay, and once I'm done, I'll double check, make sure I don't have squeeze out on the bottom. So I'll go ahead and finish up the rest of these. So they're all on now, and I've hardly got any squeeze out on these. You can see on this underside here, I've got these holes counterbored so that when I drop these bolts in, everything looks nice and clean. So next up, I need to create the holes for the T-nuts that these bolts will go into. I've got my seat base centered in there and clamped in place. So I'm going to turn this over and just dimple that from the back side here. So this will locate the T-nuts. These T-nuts require a 1/4-inch hole to install, so I used the dimple I did, drilled through. I also counterbored these a little bit so that the T-nut sits flush. Now that's probably overkill, but certainly not going to hurt anything. So that'll work well. The chairs are done now, with the exception of a couple more coats of finish. And I'm happy with how they came out. They, no surprise, they look very similar to the first set, although they're a little bit lighter. The first set was about 13.5 pounds each. The Danish cord set was about 10, and these are 11.5. So they feel a little more correct in terms of their size. That first set I made was definitely heavy. So to make these, make the seats, it's fairly straightforward, although I learned the method, or at least the materials, from John Nyquist, as I've mentioned him before. So I had the initial piece of plywood. On top of that, I think most people just put foam there, just regular foam. The way I was taught, I started with this 1/4-inch, pretty high density foam. It just makes it so you never feel like, the softer foam fully compresses. So that is with some contact adhesive that's glued to the plywood base, and then I cut it to size with a knife. On top of that is some 1-inch, I don't know, that's certainly not high density foam, but moderate density foam. That's also glued on with contact cement, and then I cut it to shape. And then I roughly cut the corners, kind of chamfer the corners a bit. You can't really get them real round, but you can get it roughly to shape. And then on top of that, some batting goes on. That kind of smooths things out a bit. And of course, then I put the upholstery on, and it is stapled in place. I will eventually put, I forget what it's called. I'll put it on the name on the screen. There's a cloth that goes on here just to make it look a little nicer. And we're good to go. So I think I'm finally all set with my set of 6 dining chairs.